is Katie Sweetman with Empowering Astrology, and thank you for joining my webinar today. I just want to let everybody know that there is, if you're listening live, that is, because I know that there will be some people listening to this after the fact, there's a chat function, and let me know if you can hear me, just so I know that I'm not talking into the void. And there's also a Q&A section, and that's a good place to ask questions as we go through the material. Just going to check and see if there's any questions so far. So yeah, if anybody could give me a little bit of a, let me know that you can hear me. So that said, we will be beginning soon. So let me just get the screen share up. So I wanted to give a little bit of the lay of the land before we start speaking, and maybe I'll turn my video on so you all can see me. Hi. I wanted to at least kind of give everybody the lay of the land, what we're going to be talking about today. And for those of you who maybe have, thank you, Rumi, you can hear me. For those who maybe saw my free introduction webinar, it's about really getting the fundamentals, and anybody who has tried to learn astrology, maybe you know that it can be complex. It's like learning a new language. And if we were talking about French, we'd be talking about vocabulary, but astrology is a symbolic language. So we're dealing with symbols, and we're dealing with the meaning behind those symbols and what happens when those symbols have a harmonious relationship or kind of a challenging relationship. So the idea behind these webinars is to give you an idea of the different elements that you will be working with when you start to learn more astrology. So the first video took you through the different signs, and this is going to kind of expand on that, and we're going to be talking about the planets and the aspects, the modalities, and the elements. So pretty basic stuff, but like I said, it really helps to have the basics down. So as I go through, I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm just going to talk as we go from slide to slide. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A section of this Google software. I will be checking back from time to time to see if there are any questions. I do recommend asking questions. Like I said, this stuff can get technical. If you're not quite getting it or I'm not being clear, please ask questions. For those listening after the fact, whether it's a few days or even longer, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to answer the question as best I can. So let me just start the screen sharing. So, let me just play this. So hopefully you guys can all see this. Again, if there's any technical difficulties on my end, just put out in the chat room. Like I said, I will be checking back from time to time to make sure that everything is still good if there's any questions. So let us begin. So the class is called Introduction to the Basics of Astrology 2. And as I said a few moments ago, it's building off the free introduction video that I did a couple months ago. And hopefully this is, again, giving you a good solid foundation. I just wanted to briefly tell you about who I am, especially those who are coming across this maybe on my website. I know a lot of you come to me via social media, Facebook and Twitter, but just to give you a little glimpse into who I am, I'm obviously an astrologer. I'm also a graphic designer and a web designer, just a little background on me. And my business, or my practice, is called Empowering Astrology. And it's called Empowering Astrology because I believe that it's important to bring consciousness into astrology. Astrology is a very old language, and we talk about fate versus free will, and I do believe in fate, but I also believe that we still, we still have to show up. We can either check out during some pretty stressful astrology transits, or we can really step up to the plate and use this time for the best intentions, whether it's some self-empowerment or healing, or really stepping out of some old patterns. As I record this, I'm doing this under the influence of the Uranus-Pluto square. Tomorrow is the exact aspect, the 6-1. And it's like, how do we all want to use that? And so maybe the way that I'm going to use that is to get out there in the world and to teach. So again, it's all about consciousness. So again, this is an astrology 101 type of talk, and we're covering the signs. Well, we're going to do a kind of a brief overview of the signs, because I do recommend watching the free video. It's on YouTube, where I do go into the signs in depth. And we're also going to talk about the elements and the planets and the aspects. So this is the kind of the individual stuff that once you have this stuff down, you can put it together and start to read the chart. So class objectives, like I said, you're not going to learn astrology in one fell swoop. I mean, I've been learning astrology all my life, but this is to give you an understanding, hopefully, in the lay of the land of the different elements that we use when astrologers look at a chart, whether it's a natal chart, the chart of an event, or the chart of the moment. So we're just going to quickly go through the 12 zodiac signs. And before we do that, I just want to check and see if there's any questions so far. It looks like we're all good. So we'll just go back to the presentation. So the 12 zodiac signs, a lot of you guys know them. Even if you don't really know that astrology, you know that your mom's a Virgo and maybe your dad's a Pisces. And you know that you're a Leo. So that's the basic of basic. And there's a logic, we got ahead of ourselves, which there's a logic to all this. And there's 12 signs, and the first sign of the zodiac is Aries. And Aries, when I taught my webinar a couple months ago, somebody asked, why is Aries first? And I was going to make a joke that I said, of course Aries is first, it's always first. But the reasoning behind that is that astrology is very much tied to the seasons. I mean, this is really ancient stuff, knowing when the start of spring and when you can plant was a matter of life or death. And also kind of more on a social level, when you have these rituals that are tied to certain times of the season. We're coming into the winter solstice here in the northern hemisphere, and that's been a very sacred time going back eons. And all cultures have their version of celebrating the solstice, the winter solstice, whether it's Yule or setting bonfires, and that stuff got worked into Christianity with Christmas. It's this idea of the return of the light. Aries is the first green shoots coming out of the kind of the previously dead earth. It's a sign of birth. It's the ram. Again, it aligns with the start of spring and the northern hemisphere. So the glyph on the right, that symbol, those are like little horns. So that's the symbol for Aries. And when you're learning astrology, you want to, like I said earlier, it's a symbolic language. So you need to have these symbols down. I tell people, make flashcards. You can draw the symbol on one side and then put the name of the symbol on the other. And then just, test yourself. maybe while you're getting ready for work, maybe while, when you have a little bit of downtime. And then you'll start to really, you'll start to know the vocabulary. And then it's about understanding the meaning behind the vocabulary, but at least you understand that this sign is Aries. So moving on. This is the symbol for Taurus. Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac. So at this point, we're moving from those green shoots of spring and into the bounty of spring, its flowers, its fertility. Taurus is an earth sign. Taurus is the bull. So yeah, moving right on. Now we are moving on to Gemini. The symbol on the right is the symbol for Gemini. Gemini is the twins. And just kind of step back for a moment. Why do we have 12 signs? Well, a couple of reasons. One, these were the 12 constellations that are along the ecliptic, meaning that the ecliptic is the path the sun takes around the Earth takes around the sun. And that point in space this is where these constellations fall along. This is where the whole debate over the 13th sign comes in, because something called precession of the equinoxes, the way the sky was, 2,000 years ago when this system came about has shifted in the last 2,000 years. So maybe but here's the thing, it's not literal, it's symbolic. So it was the Babylonians or Egyptians, or maybe even quite earlier than that, stuff that's been lost to time, that set up this idea of, this kind of base, this system of 12. And we have it in our calendar now. We've got 12 months. We've got 24 hours in the day. You look at a clock and it's, like a traditional clock, and it's got the 12 different hours. So this idea of 12 is really ingrained with how we set up order and understanding with the world. And astrology is another type of clock. It's another type of calendar. So when you're looking at your own chart or any chart, it's a different way of reading, personal time. Another way of reading the calendar. So back to the signs. Now we're on to Gemini. Gemini, it's a sign of the twins. So there's this idea of duality in Gemini, on, off, good, bad, like light and dark. People who have a lot of Gemini in their chart, it's always like more than one. They're really great at multitasking. So moving right along so we can get to the other stuff. Cancer. This is the glyph for Cancer. Cancer is the crab. It's the first water sign. At this point, we went from the fertility of Taurus to kind of the movement of the world, because Gemini is a sign that likes to move. And then we're now into Cancer, which is a sign of family, and planting roots down into the earth. It's connection, it's emotional connections, it's this nostalgia, it's memories, and it's home and family. Moving along to Leo. Leo is the 5th sign of the zodiac, and that's the glyph for Leo on the right. Moving to Leo, is a sign that's ruled by the sun, which means that the sun is its main planet. So in Leo, it's that joy, that creativity, that spark, that radiance. Sometimes we think of Leo as the diva of the zodiac, but that's just that need to perform and that need to express itself, and that's Leo. And everybody, and you may be one. Of course, you're one sign. You may be a Scorpio, but you're going to have Leo somewhere in your chart. You're going to have Gemini somewhere in your chart, and so that's where you start to get this very special blend that makes you more than just your sun sign. That's when you start to get into real astrology. So now we're moving to Virgo. Virgo is the 6th sign of the zodiac. It's the maiden. Sometimes you'll see Virgo listed as the virgin, which, it's kind of a traditional term, but I think that it kind of misses the point, because really Virgo is the young woman. In fact, in German, Virgo is called Jungfrau, young woman. It's a sign of the harvest. So we've moved from, the earth in full bloom. We've moved beyond the summer solstice, which is a sign that lines up with Cancer. And now we're moving towards another season when we have to, it's about nutrition and health and details and getting organized, Virgo. Now we're moving to Libra. Libra is the seventh sign of the zodiac. Libra is, it's interesting because we start to get to a part of the zodiac where we're dealing with concepts that are going beyond the self. Libra is a relationship sign. It's a sign that opposes Aries, meaning it's a sign that falls opposite. So if Aries is the first sign, Libra is the sign that mirrors Aries. And so we get that idea of the self versus the other in the whole Aries-Libra axis. And so Libra is a sign that teaches us about cooperation, consensus, trying to find the middle ground and trying to find balance. And yes, Libra is about beauty and harmony, but deep down, it's the need to make things, kind of that sense of balance. So moving right along to Scorpio. So we've moved from Libra, the sign of kind of balance and harmony, to Scorpio, which is a bit of a messy sign. It's a sign that it's a water sign. It's a sign that really looks deeply into our own personal darkness. It's a sign of life and death. If you're in the northern hemisphere and the sun is in Scorpio, it's autumn. It's the leaves are decaying on the trees. The nights are getting shorter. Or sorry, the days are getting shorter, the nights getting longer. And we're transitioning into a new phase of life when we go through Scorpio. Moving on to Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the Archer. It's the ninth sign of the zodiac. So when we go through the darkness of Scorpio, we emerge in Sagittarius. It is just a fact of life that we will all experience at one point or another something upsetting or something that really challenges us on a deep emotional level. That's just life, unfortunately. But it's through those experiences that we gain an understanding of ourselves, and maybe we've had a crisis in Scorpio that brings us to a search for meaning. And Sagittarius is that sign of finding truth and finding meaning, whether it's through religion or philosophy or setting off on a journey into faraway lands to find that truth. It's the quest with Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is glyph on the right. It's the arrow because it's the sign of the Archer. So you just think of distance when you think of Sagittarius, because Sagittarius goes very far. In fact, Sagittarius is the sign that aligns with the galactic center. And that might be a little bit of an abstract concept for you guys, but if you were to look in the direction of the constellation Sagittarius approximately, that is, you are looking towards the center of our galaxy, because where we are in our galaxy is actually, we're in the boondocks. Our solar system is a bit, it's kind of not really surrounded by much. But when we look towards the center of our galaxy, you see the denseness of the stars and that star matter, nebulae rather. And that's the Milky Way. That's that ribbon that goes across the night sky. That's the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius. So now we're on to Capricorn. Capricorn is the sign of achievement and success and kind of that long-term planning. It's a sign that, it's an earth sign. You always think of like monuments. And I'm from the Washington, D.C. area originally, and it's a town that's got all these marble monuments that give off this idea that it's going to last forever. I mean, whether it does, but that's kind of that very Capricornian energy. It's solid, and that's on the right. That is the glyph for Capricorn. So now we're on to Aquarius. Aquarius is the 11th sign of the zodiac. So when we hit Libra, I mentioned how we were getting into a part of the zodiac where we're starting to deal with things beyond the self. Now we're getting into abstract ideas. We got to Sagittarius, and we started to deal with religion and philosophy. Capricorn is government and achievement and career, and Aquarius is this planet, or sorry, the sign of humanity, of the collective. There's a sense of altitude with Aquarius because we've hit something that's so abstract, it's so beyond the personal experience of the individual that that's great for being able to step back and see things from a big picture standpoint. Aquarius is great at seeing the future because they have that altitude. But there can be a little bit of coldness with Aquarius because it's so transpersonal. And so moving along to Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. The glyph on the right is the glyph for Pisces. And Pisces is, again, the last sign of the zodiac, and we've got almost like as high as we could get within the realm of this world with Aquarius. And now we are starting to dissolve back into the ether with Pisces. Pisces is that space between. It's a very kind of quiet, compassionate sign. And we're preparing for a new life with Pisces. That's why Pisces is a very spiritually, mystically aligned sign, because they know that there is something beyond this world. And that's why sometimes Pisces can have that, not sadness, but it's an existential angst, because Pisces it's here in this world, and sometimes this world can be so tough. And Pisces just wants to return back from where it came. And then we complete the circle, and then we are reborn again in Aries. So I'm just going to check back and to see if there are any questions. Looks like we're good. Again, oh, I didn't enable the Q&A. Okay, well, the Q&A is now enabled. I thought I already enabled that, but if you were trying to ask a question earlier and you were not able to, definitely ask away. Sorry about that, but there is the chat as well. So I'll just keep going. So again, I just wanted to refresh the signs for everybody. Because again, it's basic stuff. You got to know your signs. So this is where we're going to get a little different. If you know a little bit about astrology, this might not be entirely new to you, but it's important to know. Now we're going to look at the elements and triplicities. And triplicities might be a new word for you, but I will explain what that means in just a moment. And the elements, as you can see, are fire, earth, air, and water. Every sign has an element, and that element does not change. So Gemini will always be an air sign. Scorpio will always be a water sign. So what does that mean? Let's take a look. So fire signs, there are 3 of them, and this is where the idea of triplicity comes in. So triple, 3, there's 3 of them. It forms, God, I can't think of the word. Well, I'll move right along. Triangle. So Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, those are your fire signs. Fire it's a very yang energy. And if you know astrology, or if you've looked at maybe more traditional textbooks or whatever, they'll use the term masculine. And maybe this is just my own prejudices. I sometimes feel like masculine is not quite the right word, because sometimes people can think more gender, and it's really about energy. So masculine energy in the most abstract sense of a way is that yang energy, that yang energy, depending on how you pronounce it. It pushes out. It forges a new path. It is that spark of life. It's the pioneer spirit. It's self-expression. It's the individual. It's the, hey, look at me. That's fire energy. If you go to a party and there's that person and they're animated and they got people listening to them, and that's that fire energy. And here's the thing, you need all the energy. There's not one that's better than others. There's certainly, fire is good for some things and not good for others. Fire is great for getting things started. Now there's on the kind of the less conscious side of fire would be the aggression, and war. In fact, look at Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, but within its within the range of let's say experience that you can have with Aries, war and aggression is on the kind of the negative side of the polarity. And not to pick on Aries, there's let's say dark and light in all the signs, and we have to kind of balance that out. And we have to know that, maybe on a bad day as an Aries, we might get a little aggressive, or a bad day as a Sagittarius, we may get a little bit on our soapbox and opinionated. So that's the fire energy. And again, triplicity just means that they're three. I'm trying to think of that. I know from Christianity, a Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Can't think of the word, but maybe you guys are thinking of it. So moving along to earth signs. If you have that spark of life with the fire, you move to earth, and it's about taking that creative energy and forming it into something solid. So Taurus is that kind of that very raw sign. If you think of a field and earth, and what are you going to do with that raw energy? And it's in Virgo that you take that raw energy and Virgo is a really great sign for organization in discernment and craft. So you take that raw energy and you apply the element of craft to it, and you build it into something bigger. Capricorn. Capricorn is a sign of mastery. So the earth energy is yin, it's feminine. It pulls in, it gathers. So Taurus is a sign of resources, money, the things that you own. So it's that need to accumulate. That yin energy pulls in. So moving along to the air signs. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And I should quickly add that this diagram that you see on the right for all of this section, I'm showing how the signs would line up within the zodiac wheel. If you are new to the chart, if it kind of intimidates you, because I talk about it to some people, and I ask them, have you ever seen your chart? And they say, I've seen it, but I have no idea what it means. Well, this idea that we're here on a planet, it's a sphere. We can look up 180 degrees, and if we could see below us into the part of the earth that is below us, that would be this kind of 360 degrees, and the circle has 360 degrees in it. So when you divide that circle by 12, so there's 30 degrees per sign. So this wheel, this zodiac wheel that you see right here, that has the signs lined up to where they are. It's something called a natural chart. I don't know if that's a little bit of a new concept for some of you guys. So you'll see the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4. Excuse me. And so Aries being the first sign, Taurus being the second sign, Gemini being the third. And like I've mentioned to even earlier, I said that the natal chart, the horoscope wheel, is just another type of clock. So this is a clock face that has 12 signs on it, or like 12 hours. And we're not going to cover houses in this talk, but there's something in astrology called houses that may or may not be a new concept for you. So these sections of the wheel would be something called houses. So this is just, again, to give you a lay of the land. And if any of this is unclear, please ask questions. The Q&A should be enabled right now, or if you're listening to this after the fact, please write out your questions in an email, and also write notes. I definitely recommend writing notes. So, we're on to the air signs, and Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and the air energy is yang energy. If you think of air, it just goes wherever the heck it wants to go. It doesn't, you can't really contain it. It's not solid like the earth energy. If you know a Gemini in your life, they're on the go. They're always kind of moving. Whether it's kind of more on the mental side of things, but that's that kind of that yang energy. And so when you are learning astrology, and I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself, but there's something called aspects. And in the aspects, there's something called a trine, Trine, and they form a triangle. So these 3 signs, and this is the case for all of them, if we just kind of go back to the fire, these are 3 signs that are in harmony with each other. And on the earth side of things, these are, again, 3 signs that are in harmony with each other. They're all earth. They all are kind of working together as one unit. So if you've got planets in Capricorn and Taurus and Virgo, they're forming something called a grand earth trine. That's very harmonious. Again, with the fire, Aries is the self. Leo is taking that raw self and creating a sense of creative expression and identity. And then moving into Sagittarius is this idea of beliefs and philosophy. So we were at air. So Gemini is about accumulating. It's a different type of accumulation than Taurus. Gemini takes the information, the ideas. It's all about learning. And then there's this with Libra, you need to be able to bounce ideas off of people. It's hard to really get to Aquarius. Aquarius is a very intellectual sign. It's the sign of like I always think of I've known a lot of Aquarians who are really into literature, and science as well. But there's this idea of like that. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Again, I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but there's this idea of mental mastery in Aquarius. So go back to Earth, if Capricorn is this idea of mastery over the earth elements, as Capricorn being ruled by Saturn, we get to Aquarius, which is also ruled by Saturn, and it's the mastery over the mental plane. So now we get to the water signs, and this is the last of the elements, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So if air is about mental and about kind of that movement, exchange of ideas and writing and intellectualism, then we get to the water signs. And the water signs are about feeling. They're about emotions. They're about the private side of life, the things that happen behind closed doors. The water signs are very intimate and to varying degrees. Cancer is the first of the water signs. It's family, it's home. If you are looking at the diagram on the right now, that's the bottom of the chart. There's a line that runs right up and down from the top of the chart, from the bottom of the chart. And that's something called one of the four angles. And that line just kind of almost like a taproot. Like a taproot is like carrots, they have that root that goes down. It's very narrow and it's got all these little fibers off of it, and it's a root. It goes into the ground and it absorbs the nutrients. But that the bottom of the chart connects us to the earth, and I don't mean earth as the element. I mean more of this physical world. Family grounds us. Family helps us have an understanding of like where we belong. The water element is about connection. So in Cancer, it's that very personal, emotional connection with the people that are in your immediate life. Moving to Scorpio. Scorpio is the sign of when you're in relationship with somebody, whether it's a romantic or a marriage or it's a business partnership. It's where you guys share things. It's your combined resources. Scorpio is a very, very intimate sign. It talks about privacy, the things that you would only divulge to somebody you completely trusted. And then we get to Pisces, and Pisces is the last of the water signs. And Pisces is very aligned to this idea of unconditional love and compassion. So Pisces is a giver. If you are a Pisces and you're listening, like this, like you watch one of those commercials that where somebody is going through some sort of emotional hardship, and you feel it almost as if it is your own. And that is that really, very sensitive water energy that Pisces experiences. And it's yin, because it's that kind of quiet, pulls in, it's happening on a side that's not really out there in the world. So I'm just going to check in and see if there's any questions, comments. Sounds like everybody's on the same page, hopefully. So again, if anything's not clear, just use the Q&A. Happy to ask a question online, or for everybody, something that you've been wondering about. So I will go back. Moving along to the modalities. So we just covered the elements, and we talked about the signs and what the element is, and how Cancer is always going to be a water sign and Aries is always going to be a fire sign. Those are the elements. And now the modalities: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. If you've been following me on Facebook, maybe you have heard me talk about the Uranus-Pluto square, and that just means the planet Uranus and the planet Pluto are making a specific connection to each other that's challenging. It's called a square. We'll go over that shortly. But it's happening in something called the Cardinal Signs, and it's a good segue into that. The cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. They're called cardinal signs because they align with the start of a new season. They align with the cardinal directions, the 4 points, north, south, east, and west, so to speak. So Aries aligns with the start of spring. And this, if you're listening to this and you're in the Southern Hemisphere, and I know that, I have listeners and clients in Australia and New Zealand, astrology is very biased towards the Northern Hemisphere. Again, it's a symbolic language. So if I'm talking about the seasons, I'm talking about the seasons in the Northern Hemisphere. So Aries aligns with the start of spring in the Northern Hemisphere. And then it's the spring equinox. So, for instance, the equinox just means that there's equal day and equal night. We get to Cancer. Cancer aligns with the start of summer, the summer solstice. It's the time when there is the most sunlight. I mean, here in New York City, it's pushing 9 p.m. At the summer solstice by the time the sun goes down. And then getting into Libra. Libra is a sign that aligns with the start of autumn. It's the autumnal equinox, so equal day, equal night. So, astrology is like a two-dimensional representation of astronomy. It derives meaning from astronomical events. So, at the summer solstice, the sun is at its most light, and if you think of that time, the earth is in full bloom and people are celebrating. And I know that there's old traditions that, like midsummer and the bonfires and kind of like the really old traditions, at least from a Northern European perspective, that align with these different astronomical events. So by the time we get to Libra, the light is waning. We're sliding towards the end of a cycle. Libra represents equal parts day and night, and it's interesting because it's the scales. Libra is the sign of the scales. I mean, it's about finding that harmony and balance, and then sliding towards Scorpio, for instance, and that's when you're starting to the light. It's really starting to wane, and we're going into this metaphor of death and rebirth. So Capricorn is the winter solstice, and the light, the days are at their shortest, and then we celebrate the return of the light at the winter solstice by burning our Yule logs and having our solstice bonfires and starting a brand new season in a way that culminates with Aries, which is when the light really returns, when the life, those green shoots, happen. So cardinal signs, they initiate the start of things because they initiate the start of a new season. So moving on to fixed signs. The fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. The fixed signs, so if the energy initiates in the cardinal signs, it has to come together in the fixed signs. So if you think of, let's say, Taurus, it's that raw material, it's the earth, it's solid. It's not, it's not that spark that you see in Aries. And so the fixed signs are about energy. It's come together. It's the middle of the season. So we've gone from the beginning of the season with the cardinal signs. Now we're in the middle of the seasons. Fixed energy is pretty solid. Fixed energy has a reputation for being quite stubborn. Cardinal signs are really great at getting things started. Sometimes they don't always follow through. Fixed energy is really good about holding the path, getting things done. Sometimes they can be a little stubborn and a little unmoving if you need to get them to embrace new ideas. So moving along to the mutable signs. Now we're getting towards the end of a season, and the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. The mutable signs release energy. They're really good about having flexibility, whereas in the fixed signs, sometimes for better or for worse, it can be a little unmoving. But now the energy is releasing. It's getting ready for a new season. So like Gemini and Pisces, for instance, there's a sense of movement in the mutable signs because it's transitioning out into a new season. So just want to check in and see if there's any questions. Looks like everybody is good to go. Again, have any questions, just let me know. That's what I'm here for. So going back to everything, now let's take a look at the planets. So, we talked about the signs. We looked at them on a very basic level. We, got familiar with the different glyphs, even though we might be a little new to these symbols. They might be a little strange and weird. And now we understand that these signs have a little bit more depth to them. Maybe they start with a new season. Maybe they're really good with emotions. Maybe they're really good at getting things started. So now you can see that there's a little bit of different dimension to these signs. So you know that if you're a Gemini, you are a mutable sign, and that sign is also an air sign. If you're a Sagittarius, you know that again is also a mutable sign, but it's also a fire sign. So again, these are the different facets to the individual signs. So now we're moving on to the planets, and these signs are like setting the stage. The signs are like the playing field, and the planets are now the people on the playing field. These are the players. So the planets can be broken up into different categories. The first being the luminaries. And you may have an idea of why they're called the luminaries, because the sun, it gives off light, and the moon, it reflects light. When you are learning astrology, everything is important, but there is a sense of hierarchy in astrology. And the sun and the moon are your top players, your king and your queen, so to speak. There is a very strong yang energy to the sun and a yin energy to the moon. In the broadest sense of the word. Sometimes the sun can be this very kind of masculine energy, or the moon can be feminine. And, we all have masculine and feminine energy. It's not gender-based. So those are the luminaries. You may have the sun, even though it's kind of a yang energy, in a sign that's very yin, Pisces. But that the sun has a need to express itself, and the moon has a need to feel and to connect. The sun is the ego, and the moon is the it's the unconscious. It's that quieter side. When we have to feed our moon, we're really good about doing our sun. That moon can sometimes get neglected. When you're feeling cranky and kind of ungrounded and unhappy about where you're at, feed your moon. The moon is about nurturing and caring. It's the mother in a very archetypical sense. And, trust me, I've had clients and I've heard some stories about some of your mothers. So there is a sense of like trying to feed yourself through the moon in that very kind of broadest sense of the mother. And the sun being this idea of like the father. These are kind of really old polarities in terms of gender, but that's kind of some of what you'll run into this thinking when you're learning some of the old texts. And the sun can sometimes be the mother, and the moon can sometimes be the father. It really depends on the type of energy that was being held in your family growing up. So now we move on to the personal planets. And the personal planets are Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So we're moving beyond the sun and the moon. And if there's a hierarchy, for the most part, these planets are kind of like the next tier down, that they all serve a very important purpose. That's not to say that they are less important than the sun and the moon per se. But the sun and the moon kind of deals with these very fundamental ideas. So Mercury is your planet of communication. When you know your Mercury in your chart, and everybody has a different Mercury, you have to look up where yours was when you were born. That there's plenty of websites that can help you get your chart for free. Astro.com is one of them. When you find your Mercury, just like if you found your moon sign, the Mercury sign is going to tell you how you think, how you learn, and how you communicate. So Mercury, on a very fundamental, out-of-the-box level, it's curious, it wants to learn, there's a needing of ideas. But sometimes depending on what sign Mercury is in, like maybe like if Mercury is in Taurus, Taurus being a little bit of a slower paced sign, that sense of communication, there's like a different speed to it. So Mercury is going to tell you how you think, how you learn, how you communicate. Venus, the other personal planet, is a sign that tells you, or the planet that tells you how you experience relationship. It's how you compromise. Are you ruthless in your compromising? Or are you really good at finding the middle ground? Or sometimes people are pushover. And so maybe your Venus will tell you about the ways that you experience one-on-one relationships. And these are all relationships. These are not just marriages or romantic committed partnerships. Venus is harmony, it's beauty, but it is aesthetic, but there's a sense of needing to make things nice. And with Venus, I mean, we need that energy. Otherwise, it can be a little rough and unformed. And then we come to Mars. It's interesting. We're talking about yin and yang with the sun and moon. And there's definitely a yin and yang polarity with Venus and Mars. In that very traditional sense of feminine, masculine, but again, everybody has feminine and masculine energy. And Mars being this very yang energy, it's about going out there and getting what you want and being assertive. Your Mars is going to tell you that. So when you look at your chart, or you look up your chart and you find that your Mars is in Gemini, you feel very motivated. And that's another word for Mars, motivation. You feel very motivated to seek out information, to talk, to move. If your Mars is in Pisces, you are very motivated to seek out a connection to source, to connect to very mystical ideas and concepts, and maybe art and music, because Pisces is a very artistic and musically inclined planet. All of the planets are gonna, I don't want to say function better, because that's not quite, it kind of gives an idea of good and bad. All the planets, there are signs that they are more at home in. And there are signs that maybe there's a little bit of a challenge to it. And that's not to say that, this idea of good, bad. In traditional thinking, Mars doesn't like to be in Cancer. That's not to say it's bad to have Mars in Cancer, maybe in the ideas of the ancients, but when Mars is in Cancer, a sign that it's not as home in, you have to work that Mars in a different way than it's maybe comfortable in doing. Or Mars in Libra is another, like Mars is in Venus's sign, it's in a sign of compromise, but Mars is about getting what you want. And so Mars has to learn the art of compromise and Libra. So wherever your Mars is, that's going to tell you how you kind of get what you want, how you assert yourself. Mars is also a sign that's very much linked to vitality. If you didn't have Mars, you would have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. To kind of go back to Venus and, where Venus is comfortable and not comfortable. Venus is very comfortable in Libra. It's a sign that it rules. And sometimes Venus is a little uncomfortable in Scorpio, because Scorpio is a sign that doesn't, it's not terribly concerned with pleasantries. It wants to talk about the things that are a little uncomfortable. It's Scorpio is a very raw sign, but when Venus is in Libra, it's all about the surface side of things and making things beautiful on that kind of surface level. It's relationship, but it's not what happens behind closed doors. That's Scorpio. So now we're moving to something called the social planets. These would be Jupiter and Saturn. They're called the social planets because they're dealing with ideas that are on a societal level. To go back for a second, the personal planets are dealing with you. How do you communicate? How do you love? How do you assert yourself? But when you get to the social planets, you're dealing with things that are outside of the self. Jupiter is what you believe, but you're dealing with abstract concepts, religion, things that are outside of the neighborhood that you live in. Jupiter is this planet that pulls you outside of your four walls. It gives you a sense of curiosity, but in a much grander scale. Jupiter is the explorer of the zodiac. It's also the guru. I think that's even how it's looked at in Indian astrology. Quick aside, this is what we're learning here is Western, definitely more on the modern side of things, Western psychological astrology. There are different types of astrology. Indian is another one of them. It's also called Vedic or Jyotish. And that's a system that is a brother or cousin to Western astrology, and they have common roots, and there is commonality between them, but they have different worldviews. So that was my sidebar. So Jupiter is the guru of the planets, and so I was talking. Each planet has a rulership, and maybe that's something I should go back to very quickly. The sun is ruled, or Leo rather, is ruled by the sun. So each planet in the zodiac, each sign in the zodiac has a planet that's associated with it. So Leo's planet is the sun. So when the sun is in Leo, the sun is home. When the sun is in Aquarius, which is the sign that's opposite of Leo, the sun is in an area that it's very alien, very foreign. That's not to say that the sun doesn't, don't think like, oh, my sun's in Aquarius, that's bad. No, it's just, there's a sense of familiarity and then unfamiliarity. And then when you're in Aquarius, the sun has gone as far as it can away from itself, away from its home. The moon, Cancer is ruled by the moon. So the moon's always going to kind of telegraph back to Cancer in the chart. The moon, because Capricorn is the sign that is the farthest from Cancer, it's the sign opposite. So when the moon is in Capricorn, it's the furthest from home. So Mercury, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So you may have Mercury in Gemini, but your Mercury may be someplace very different. Mercury, when Mercury's in Sagittarius, which I believe it is right now, don't quote me on that, Mercury is the farthest away from its home turf. But Mercury Virgo is also ruled by Mercury. When you move beyond the luminaries, each sign has a planet. You'll see the repeat. So when Mercury is in Gemini, which is its rulership, it's the yang side of Mercury. When Mercury is in Virgo, another sign that it rules, that's the yin side of Mercury. So the yang goes out there, the yin pulls in. Mercury and Gemini, it kind of accumulates information, and then in Virgo you sort it out, and you start to create a sense of order and structure. And Virgo, Venus. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. So when Venus is in Scorpio, as I mentioned, it's gone, farthest it can from itself home. And then Libra is also by Venus. So Venus is at home in both Taurus and Libra. And then the opposite. So Venus is in Aries. Venus is in an area that is normally about Mars. So she has to learn to adapt. The two so yin is Venus in Taurus, and yang is Venus in Libra. Taurus pulls in and accumulates, and Libra it goes out there and like experiences a relationship, and it needs to connect to people on a one-on-one level. Mars is ruled by Aries. So Mars is very much at home in Aries. And it's also ruled by Scorpio. So there's kind of this duality to the planets. So in Aries, it's a fire sign, it's yang, it goes out there, gets what it wants. In Scorpio, it's a yin, it's water, it's about the emotional side of things, it's about psychology, it's about the stuff that happens on the inside, generally. So back to the social planets, Jupiter is ruled, Pisces and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So when Jupiter is in Sagittarius, it's Sagittarius is very much a sign of philosophy. It's earthly religion. So Jupiter very much is about experiences on an earthly realm. And it's that yang energy. I always think of the explorer. Like, it takes a lot of, guts to go and get on a ship, whether it's a spaceship or, a sailing ship, and to seek out new undiscovered territory. That's that Jupiter pushing outward, that yang Jupiter. But in Pisces, it's the yin Jupiter. It pulls in. It's about mysticism. It's about meditation. It's about it's the emotional and internal side of Jupiter's growth, because Jupiter is a planet of growth and bounty. In fact, as I record this, there's Jupiter is making a very nice aspect to the Sun in Sagittarius. But I digress. So that's the two sides of Jupiter. And there's two sides to Saturn. So every planet has two sides of it, the yin and the yang, except for the sun and the moon. But the sun has its own polarity. The sun is the yang, the moon is the yin. Saturn, Capricorn and Aquarius are ruled by Saturn. So what I was saying earlier, when you get to the social planets, you're dealing with abstract concepts. You're dealing with things at a societal level. Saturn in Capricorn is government. It's those kind of big systems that you need to create structure and order. Saturn or Capricorn is a sign of achievement and career and your status in the world. So again, we're dealing with things that are very much outside the personal level. It's on a transpersonal level. And so Saturn in Capricorn is a yin energy. You're kind of bringing in this, there's like a sense of wealth and status with Saturn or with Capricorn, even though the sign that's really about wealth is Scorpio. But there is a sense of accumulation and pulling in with Capricorn and Saturn. and then the so that would be Earth Saturn, and then Air Saturn, which is the yang side of things, because air is a yang type of energy. Saturn in Aquarius, the other side of the facet. Aquarius is about these, again, these transpersonal concepts of humanity, the collective, social justice, democracy. So these big things, and those are why those are called the social planets. Oh, and I before I get ahead of myself, and what I really love about the old system, and this is an aside, and this might be a little advanced for some of you guys, but I use traditional rulerships. And what do I mean by traditional rulerships? And this will become very apparent in just a moment when I talk about the outer planets. Before the outer planets were discovered, and when I say outer planets, I mean Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. There was our understanding of the universe ended at Saturn. Saturn was the last planet in the old classical tradition, and this is considering the moon and the sun as planets, even though we know on an astronomical level they're not planets. But there's 7. That's a very mystical number of 7. 7 days in the week. I think it's 7 colors in the spectrum. It's a very sacred number, 7. But when these outer planets were discovered, and Uranus was discovered in, I think it was 1780, or very close to 1780, it upended the order. It took a while, but I think as early as the early 19th century, astrologers were trying to figure out what do we do with Uranus, because it was outside of this classical order. And there's a beautiful symmetry to the old classical order. And maybe I didn't include this in this talk, but you'll see there's this symmetry. So, there's the symmetry of Saturn and Aquarius and Capricorn, kind of, and all the signs kind of branch out and they form a symmetry. But anyway, so yeah, we get to the outer planets, and now we're dealing with things that are really transpersonal. The outer planets are the agents of fate. I know it's a big word, fate. When you experience the outer planets, and this is, it might be a little bit of an advanced concept, through something called a transit, you are starting to experience things that are way beyond your kind of human level of things. Uranus is the awakener. Its function is to kind of shake you out of the old order. So if up until 1780, the last planet we could see was Saturn in the sky. Saturn is the planet of boundaries. It was the demarcation between this world and the next. And then you get into Uranus, and the planet is invisible, like, for the most part. I believe that they're under very specific conditions. It can be viewed by the naked eye. I can't remember how and when, but for the most part, it is invisible. So we're dealing with, when you get to the outer planets, we're dealing with things that were heretofore invisible. When Uranus was discovered, if you know your history, that was a time of revolution. 1780s, you've got the revolution in the United States, you got revolution in France, and the world started to shift out of that very Saturnian structure. The Saturnian structure was, basically, for the most part, a king or a queen, and that hierarchy that comes with that type of order. And then Uranus comes in and shakes it all up, and you've got people riding in the streets. Uranus is a planet that helps us seek out innovation. It awakens us to something new. But sometimes on the negative side of things, Uranus can be chaotic. But it's my belief, and this is a little bit of a philosophical belief, is that these planets have come in. I mean, yes, there is the physical astronomical side of things, but as archetypes, as these invisible, as these concepts, it's like we weren't able to do Uranus until Uranus was discovered. I don't know if that quite makes sense. But Uranus, in its most exalted way, is about humanity and social justice and democracy, when it works. So moving from Uranus to Neptune, and just as a funny aside, when Uranus was first discovered, it was discovered by an English astronomer working, I believe, for the King of England at the time, George the Third. So the astronomer was trying to figure out what to name this new planet, and he called it George after George the Third. That didn't stick, obviously. For a while it was called Herschel, because the astronomer who discovered it was named Herschel. And if you swear to God, if you look at some of the old astrology texts, and I mean old, I mean 19th century, they still called Uranus Herschel. So it's just kind of funny. Anyway, this is nerd humor. So moving along to Neptune. Neptune was discovered, I believe, in the 1840s. It was discovered, I think it was the first planet to be discovered by, it wasn't spotted. It was like it was like a mathematical prediction. They knew that Uranus was wobbling in a certain way, and there had to be a mass out there, a body, to exert that kind of pull on the planet. And lo and behold, they were correct. There was a planet there, and that planet was Neptune. So they finally discovered it in the 1840s. So this is the astronomical side of things. But on the astrological side of things, that time in history, you're seeing a shift towards, I mean, I know definitely in American history, but there was this idea of trying to experience spirituality outside of the very Jupiterian, Sagittarian, Saturnian, like this is your religion. You can't question it. And now you have this explosion of new religions in the 1840, 1830s. There's spiritualism. Around the time Neptune was discovered, this idea of connecting to something in the astral plane, going to a seance or a medium. So these are all very Neptunian concepts. And it was also a time of the discovery or the invention of photography. So Neptune is this, Neptune's a very kind of ethery planet. It's not very physical. And so if you have a lot of Neptune in your natal chart, sometimes you kind of struggle being here in this world because you're just so open to something else. And I think that Neptune is available to us as an archetype to remind us that this world that we live in is an illusion. Neptune is the dream. It's the unconscious mind. And in many ways, this physical world is just another dream. And one day we will wake up from it. And so now we move on to Pluto. Pluto was discovered in the 1930s. I think it was actually 1930. Don't quote me on that, but I know it was early 30s. Pluto was discovered by an astronomer in the United States. There was a kind of this long-running conjecture for a while of this quote-unquote planet X. I think astronomers were like, well, wait, if there's Neptune out there, there has to be something else beyond Neptune. And well, yes, there was. There's actually a lot of stuff beyond Neptune. But Pluto came into our experience as a collective around the time of the rise of psychology. So Pluto is this planet that helps us to get into the deepest part of our psyche. It's also, if you know your history, it was not a fun time to be in the world in the 1930s and by extension the 1940s. Pluto is the planet of non-negotiable transformation. And what is more non-negotiable than death? Pluto is the planet of literal and sometimes metaphorical and sometimes literal death. When you have a Pluto transit, something is dying. The way that something has been done up until that point is irrevocably changing. And if we look to Scorpio, and Scorpio, so all the planets, or sorry, the outer planets, they were assigned to zodiac signs, because again, they didn't really know what to do with Uranus, so they assigned it to Aquarius. Why they did that is another, that's a bit of a digression, so I'm not going to go there. There was some thinking behind why Aquarius is ruled by, sorry, why Uranus is ruled by Aquarius. Or did I get that right? But so yeah, so there was some logic behind that. So if you are an Aquarius, your two planets, your traditional ruler is Saturn and your modern ruler is Uranus. I personally use traditional rulerships. They hold up for me better, but I definitely use the outer planets. For me, they very much represent specific karma. That's another talk. So Neptune, Pisces is ruled by Neptune in the modern sense. So the traditional ruler is Jupiter, the modern ruler of Pisces is Neptune. In fact, Neptune is in the sign of Pisces right now. It's been there since about 2012. Neptune takes Neptune takes 160 odd years to go around the sun. So none of us have been alive since Neptune was last in Pisces. Neptune was last in Pisces during the American Civil War. Neptune is a planet of dissolving. And from a mundane political level, at least in the United States, we saw this idea of Neptune at work with the dissolving of the Union. Kind of the sense of boundaries where you couldn't quite hold on to them. Also, that was a time of a lot of spiritualism in this country because a lot of people died. And so spiritualism became very, in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, here in this country. Uranus takes 84 years to go around the sun. So if you're lucky, you'll experience your Uranus return, but you would have to be one of the undead if you live to see your Neptune return. So moving it back onto Pluto, sorry, got a little off track for a moment. The Pluto rules Scorpio in the modern sense. The traditional sense, Mars rules Scorpio. Pluto is a very powerful planet. I know that it's technically not a planet anymore in the astronomical sense, but you can't kind of forget about Pluto, because Pluto is really that planet that's going to take you through a very powerful sense of transformation. And again, as I record this, Uranus and Pluto are making something called a square to each other. So we're in this era of seeing, because Pluto is in Capricorn right now. It's been there since 2008. We've been looking at the underbelly of government and banking, finance. Those are all kind of Pluto Capricorn ideas. And then versus Uranus is in Aries right now. It's been there since 2011, and so we're seeing the kind of the individual, the rights and the freedom of the individual versus the control and power of the state, and that's the butting of the heads right now. I mean, that's just no sense of politics and what's right and what's wrong. That's just what's happening right now. So that's why this time has been really chaotic. But again, I digress. I'm just going to take a quick check-in to see if there's any questions, because I've been Oh, somebody said that there was a problem with the sound. Oh, I'm so sorry about that, guys. See if there's any questions. Sounds like there was a sound problem that fixed itself. So I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint slide. And we just talked about the outer planets. So the lunar nodes. Here's the funny thing. The lunar nodes actually aren't planets in the traditional sense. They are a mathematical point. It's where the moon intersects with the ecliptic. So what does that mean? Again, the ecliptic is the path that the Earth takes around the sun. And the moon is going to dip back and forth on that ecliptic each month. And there's something called the lunar nodes. And when you place them into the chart, they're very important. I could, I'm not going to get too much into lunar nodes, but I just wanted to at least have people know that they exist, because when you place them in the chart, they form an axis. They're directly 180 degrees apart from each other. So you've got the north node on one end, and you've got the south node on the other. And the south node rather is your karma. It's the well of experience, the well of emotional experience that you bring from other lifetimes. So that south node is going to be in a particular sign depending on when you were born. Right now, the south node is in Libra. No, sorry, is in Aries. So if you were born right now, let's say you're a brand new baby, your south node would be in Aries. So you are bringing with you into this lifetime a well of experience of doing Aries, and that's the warrior. That's also the pioneer, but that's also that kind of aggressive energy that sometimes Aries can have. Again, there's light and dark and everything. So if that's the karma that we're working with right now as a collective, because we're all experiencing the south node right now in Aries, and we're seeing that on a collective level as violence. We have to look at the karma of violence. And then if you were born into this time, you would be dealing with your own personal karma around the sign of Aries. And the north node, again, 180 degrees away, opposing the south node. The north node is your dharma. It's your potentiality for this lifetime. It's new experiences. The soul is on a journey through many lifetimes, and it needs to bring in new experience. And so, just to kind of reference where we're at right now astrologically, the north node is in Libra, which is the sign opposite of Aries. So that north node, you're bringing in Libra. We need, right? I mean, what is being told to us right now in terms of the astrology is that we need to seek out Libra. We need to seek out compromise and partnership and harmony and consensus. All these words for Libra, because when you have that kind of stickiness of the karma of the south node, sometimes we can get a little too individuated. Sometimes we can forget that there are other people out there, and those people have needs, and we have to find the balance between the north and the south node. So that's just where the nodes are right now, but they're going to be somewhere in your chart. If you have the south node in Pisces, you come into this world with a deep sense of connection to the other side, psychic abilities, mysticism. There is also the artistic side of Pisces. You have a deep sense of unconditional love that can sometimes get you in trouble. And for those of you who have strong Pisces or strong Neptune, you know what I'm talking about. It's just you can give and you can give and you can give, and you sometimes forget to do that North Node, Virgo, which is finding discernment. So everything in astrology is about polarity, about opposites, and learning to negotiate the tug and the pull of the opposite signs, whether it's Pisces to Virgo or Leo to Aquarius. Those are two examples of signs that oppose each other. So when you find the nodes in your chart, that's going to tell you what sort of karma you're bringing in, some of maybe the archetypes around your past lives, and then moving towards that North Node, which is what you came here to do. It's your kind of that North compass point. And so I'm not going to go into modern editions, but I at least wanted to mention that there are planets other than the ones that we've covered. The centaurs, for instance. So, after they discovered Pluto in 1930, they've been discovering other things. There's something called Chiron. That's Chiron. I didn't list him here, but he is something called a centaur. He was discovered in 1977, in November 1977. So that, when something is discovered on an astronomical level, astrologers get very, very excited because it's a new archetype to play with. It's something new to put into the chart and to unlock information, a different dimensionality of experience. There's something called the goddesses, Ceres, Juno, Vesta, and Pallas. And the irony is that Ceres was discovered in 1801. So, as a planet, we've known about her since, almost 200 years, over 200 years. But she was outside of the classical order of the universe. So, yeah, there's another planet. I believe Ceres is between Mars and Jupiter, I think. And then Juno is an asteroid. Vesta and Pallas also asteroids, but they're big asteroids in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And some astrologers work with these points. I mean, just to go back to the centaurs, I work with Chiron. I work with Chiron a lot. Chiron tells me a lot about your core wounding. It's that thing, that button that gets pressed over and over again. You don't even realize it. And everything tends to go back to that Chiron. But Chiron is that fuel for great empathy, because we have to go out and try to heal others because we ourselves know that we are kind of carrying this energy of having been wounded. Again, we could have a whole talk on Chiron. So I feel like I'm shortchanging Chiron a little bit. But again, I wanted you guys to know that there are other things that you can put in the chart, but the most important thing are, as a beginner or as an intermediate person who's really trying to create a strong foundation, is to have the ones that we just covered down. The last line of this slide is the trans-Neptunians, and this may be actually the first time you're hearing about them. Starting in the early 2000s, there was this almost boom of finding new planets in our solar system, starting with, I think it was Haumea. So when it says trans-Neptunians, these are planets that are beyond Neptune. So technically, Pluto is a trans-Neptunian. There's, like I said, there's Haumea, which I forget who that was named after. The planets in our solar systems are all named after gods and goddesses connected to creation myths. So when we get to the early 2000s and we're starting to discover new planets in our solar system, we're, trying to get out of the Greek system of, actually the Roman system in this case, and give names from different myths from around the world. I think Haumea is Hawaiian. Don't quote me on that. There's Eris. Actually, that's the Greek god of discord. There's Sedna. Sedna has an 11,000 year orbit, so it doesn't move a lot. Eris is about 500 years. There's Mackay. Mackay is another planet. Like if you go on Wikipedia and type in trans-Neptunians, you'll see all these other planets in our solar system, and I just think it's funny because nobody really knows about this, and I find it fascinating. So the trans-Neptunians we're talking pioneer stuff. Like there are some astrologers that are working with the trans-Neptunians, but if you think about astrology, is the system as we know it is about 2,000 years old, but astrology goes back beyond that, and these vocabulary words and these elements in the chart we've been working with for thousands of years. These trans-Neptunians are in many cases we've only known about them for 15. In the grand scheme of things, that is a huge amount of time versus a very, very, very small amount of time. We are, astrologers will continue to try to figure out what the trans-Neptunians mean. When Uranus was discovered in 1780, it took maybe 50 years, it took a generation or two before astrologers really felt like they had a good understanding. And just as an aside, maybe you're wondering, well, how do they know Uranus means this? Well, it's observation. What was going on when Uranus was here or there? What was going on when Uranus was doing certain things wherever in your chart when you were born? And that's how, it's research. It's straight up old-fashioned research. And so there are astrologers out there who are really into research. They don't see clients. They're just data people. And they're doing the research to try to figure out, like, okay, well, what do these new trans-Neptunians mean? Well, how can we better understand even what Ceres, Juno, and Vesta and Pallas does? Because again, these are things that are not really used. So again, I just wanted you to kind of know that there are other things in the chart beyond this. So I'm just going to check back and see if there are any questions. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And this is where we're going to get into aspects. And aspects, I think, are where people get a little lost, maybe is the best way to put it. I talk to people, I ask them, what do you know about astrology? And they're like, I know about the signs, I know about some of the planets, the sun and the moon, but I don't understand aspects. So you're probably, you're not going to walk away here suddenly understanding how to put aspects into use. The idea is to maybe understand some of the theory behind aspects so it doesn't seem so foreign. So what are aspects? You have to always keep thinking about that circle. The circle is where everything happens in astrology. It's the wheel. It's the wheel of the zodiac. It's the wheel of the natal chart. It's the wheel of karma. So aspects derive meaning. Or rather, aspects are like the distance between planets within that circle. And, there are 360 degrees in the circle. So if you think of this dial, and it has the zodiac signs around the dial, one planet might be at one particular place in the circle, and another planet might be at another place in the circle. they make an aspect to each other. That aspect might be, how do I put this, strong, or something that's a little on the weaker side. Your strong aspects are something called the conjunction, the opposition, the square. There's the trine and the sextile. Aspects can be pretty much divided into harmony versus disharmony, ease versus challenge. So if you're, this is just super rudimentary. If your sun is in Leo and your Venus is in Aquarius, they're making an opposition to each other because because Leo and Aquarius are opposite signs to each other. If that sun again is in Leo and Saturn is in Scorpio, they're making a square to each other because those are two signs that are 90 degrees apart from each other. So if an opposition is 180 degrees, a square is 90. It's hard. And this is where knowing the elements and the modalities will really enrich your understanding of aspects, because when you have, let's say, the Leo sun, the Leo is a fire sign. It's fixed. It's a fixed sign. If it is running up against Saturn and Scorpio, Saturn is in Scorpio, is a sign of, it's a water sign. It's a fixed sign. So you have two fixed signs that are not in alignment. They're kind of butting heads. So they're making what's called a 90-degree aspect to each other. Whereas if Saturn is in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is a fire sign, and that sun is in Leo, they're making a trine to each other. That's Trine. They're in a harmonious relationship, and it's harmonious because they're both fire signs. The challenging aspects are when the planets are in the same modality. There's not a lot of wiggle room. And then if the planets are in the same element, they're in harmony with each other. There's something called a sextile, which I'll show you the different aspects in just a moment. And that's when, let's say, we'll just use that Leo sun for an example again. Leo is a yang sign. It goes out there into the world energetically. So when it forms a sextile to Libra, which is two signs over from Leo, Libra is another yang sign, so they're in harmony, but they're in different elements, but they still have that harmony. So that's why sometimes people say a sextile is not as strong of a harmonious connection as opposed to a trine, because a trine, you're in the same element, you're on the same page, you're working together. So that brings me to the first aspect. So this is the conjunction. And I should just quickly say that we are dealing with something called Ptolemaic aspects. I think that I spelled that out in a different slide. So if you don't really understand what that word is, it's based on Ptolemy, which was a Greek guy. I guess I'm not really knowing my history well at the moment, but there are something called Ptolemaic aspects, and these are like the most powerful aspects. There's other aspects, and those are not as powerful, and that's actually open for debate, but that's a different conversation for a different time. The conjunction just means that two planets are 0 degrees apart. So imagine that circle, and imagine two planets on that circle, and they're right up against each other. So they're fused. The conjunction is like a marriage. It's two planets that you can't separate them. They are both working in tandem. A conjunction, and it really depends on the planets. It can be harmonious or challenging. So if you've got, let's say Venus. Venus, beauty, harmony, making things nice, is in a conjunction with Jupiter. Jupiter is this planet of growth and abundance. And let's face it, Jupiter likes the finer things in life. So you got these two planets together in a conjunction, it's pretty sweet. But if it's Venus and Pluto, that can be a little challenging because Pluto is a very intense planet that can speak to the shadow side of experience of control and power. And Venus suddenly is dealing with some pretty intense energy. So it's not the kind of Venus, God bless her souls, can sometimes like things a little easy. You know, both Jupiter and Venus are something called benefics in astrology. This is a very old-timey traditional view of the planets. The idea that the benefics, they create good fortune, and the malefics, that's malefics, are the kind of the agents of bad fortune. The malefics in the traditional sense are Saturn and Mars. So if you have Saturn and Mars together, that's a pretty OMG kind of connection between two planets. So, you know, when you're looking at your own chart, you may have a conjunction, you may not. It's neither good nor bad, but if you do, these two planets are working in step with each other. And it's, you know, it's up to looking at the individual planets to understand what, you know, to understand that marriage. Is it a happy marriage or is it a stressful marriage? So I mentioned the sextile earlier. These are two planets that are 60 degrees apart. So in a kind of a broader sense, these are the sextile signs are sextile in their every other sign. So Aries and Gemini are kind of a sextile relationship, meaning that they're friendly, they get along, they have a very kind of Venusian relationship. When I say Venusian, I mean Venus. Planets in sextile, they help each other out. So it's not a super in-your-face energy, but it's nice to have a sextile, don't get me wrong. And I should also mention, when you are learning astrology, it can be very tempting to get into good-bad thinking. Do yourself a favor and don't get into good-bad thinking, because that challenging opposition, that's not to belittle the fact that it's a very challenging opposition in your natal chart, but you can work with that opposition. You can do amazing things with that opposition, or it could just run you right over. The sextile and even the trine, which we'll discuss in just a moment, they're harmonious aspects, but you can get super lazy super quick with harmonious energy. Which brings me to the square. These are when planets are 90 degrees apart within that circle. A square is challenging. It's two planets that are very much entrenched in their own way of thinking, and they have to come together. Again, sometimes when you can see all these squares in your chart and you get like, oh my God, like I have all this bad energy in my chart. No, no, no. You know, your squares can be some of your biggest assets. You have to work your squares. You know, squares are incredibly motivating. So if you have you see somebody's chart and it's all like harmonious energy, they don't do much because everything is easy for them. But you need a square to kind of, you know, light a fire under you and get you going. So that's the square. So the trine, and that's when two planets are in the same element. It's 120 degrees apart in the circle, and they're forming a harmonious relationship. You know, Leo and Sagittarius, those are signs that are trine to each other. So the opposition, these are when planets are exactly opposing each other. And I should also mention, while I think about it, there's something in astrology called orb, and that's ORB. And that means the amount of space you're going to allow for something to be opposing each other, to be conjunct, or sextile, trine, etc. They're everybody's different. The general rule of thumb is that you can have up to 10 degrees. So I think some people say 8 for an opposition. This might be a little bit of an intermediate concept if you're completely new to rulerships, or sorry, to aspects, but just for the sake of mentioning it. So with I think squares, I think the conventional wisdom is 7 degrees. I think it depends. I feel good with like a 5 or 7 degree orb with a square. When you have an outer planet as one of the 2 planets as part of the aspect, I tend to give a little bit more room for the outer planets because they have a lot of influence. So maybe there is a bit of a wide square between 2 planets. Let's say Uranus and Venus, and that I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So this is just for the people who maybe already know aspects, but that square will be maybe exact by progression. But progressions are an advanced astrological concept, so we won't go there. So opposition are 2 planets that are apart from each other. There are other aspects, the quincunx, the semi-square, the sesquiquadrate, and these are just to name a few. They all have different meanings. I will work with the quincunx. A quincunx is also known as an inconjunct, and that's 150 degrees apart from each other, but it's not considered Ptolemaic. So when Ptolemy, I think, kind of created a little bit more of a codified sense of astrology a couple thousand years ago, that was not the one that he used. So that's when we say it's not Ptolemaic. Some astrologers swear by some of these aspects. We just don't have time to go into them, but I wanted to put them on your radar. So if you are starting to get comfortable with this idea of aspects, and aspects are where you start to take the individual words and start to be able to form sentences. Aspects is where you start to ride the bike, so to speak, as doing astrology. So if you can get your signs down, if you can get your modalities and your elements down, and then start to understand the aspects individually, that's when you can start to put it together. But again, it takes time. It's like, again, to use another metaphor, it's like learning piano. You're going to start out with really basic picking out notes on the keyboard. Maybe it's playing chopsticks. Maybe it's playing like something that's maybe a little bit more complex, that's been arranged to be a lot more easy to follow or easy to play for somebody who's just beginning. So when you start to explore astrology more, you're going to be picking out those individual notes. You're going to be a little focused on the different pieces as opposed to the big picture. But that's okay. That's how you learn. And then hopefully will come a time when you're able to step back and to look at a natal chart and to see it for both of some of its parts and also its individual parts. So I just want to check in and see if there's any questions. There is a question. How does one integrate Venus-Uranus square? A male. That's a good question. There is some thinking in astrology that a man is going to experience a planet like Venus through his relationship with women. I'm a little on the fence with that thinking, but I'll just go with it for the sake of, because it's kind of a conventional wisdom. So he may experience relationships with women that really challenge him, because it's a square to Uranus. If Uranus is awakenings, it's about maybe female relationships that really kind of push him outside of his understanding of who he is. But Venus is also a sense of aesthetic and cooperation. And here's the thing with outer planets: you need to bring consciousness to those outer planets, because otherwise you're just going to do the bottom rung of that outer planet, and the bottom rung of Uranus can be very chaotic. It's always, it can always have a hard, I don't want to say have a hard time in relationships, but maybe relationships are very chaotic. You have to kind of ground that Uranian energy. And when I have clients who have Uranus in aspect to either Venus or the ruler of their seventh, and this is a little bit of an intermediate concept, I tell them that they can't do a relationship in the standard narrative or the standard paradigm. They have to do relationship or love or sexuality in a way that is authentic to them, because ultimately Uranus is a planet that demands authenticity. So to go back to the question, maybe this is somebody who has to be really true to himself about the Venusian ideas and concepts, aesthetic, beauty. I would say sexual. Mars is more sexuality, but there is the relationship side of Venus. So keep your questions coming. Just get back to the PowerPoint. I threw these in because I didn't know how much time we would have. I slated this for 2 hours, and we're coming up on the last 9 minutes. So again, if you have any questions before we wrap up, this is your time. And I just wanted to show you what it looked like when you put it all together. So this is a natal chart. This may be the first time you are seeing something like this. Maybe you've seen a natal chart before, but you haven't understood it. There's a whole class I'm going to teach in actually reading the natal chart. So this class and the free introduction was about giving you the vocabulary to understand these individual elements in the natal chart. So as you can see, this is the natal chart of Amy Winehouse, God rest her soul. It's a lot of stuff to take in. And if you already have a familiarity with the signs and the planets, maybe it's not so difficult to understand. So we'll start with the planets. So that circle at the bottom of that chart, with the circle within the circle, that's the glyph for the sun. And so we can see that her sun is in Virgo. How do I know her sun is in Virgo? Because it's in that little, you'll see that there are 12 areas on this band, this zodiacal band around the circle, and the sun is within that 30-degree section that we designate as Virgo. So she was born in September. She was born when the sun was in Virgo. Her moon, and that's usually one that people can identify because it looks like the crescent moon, is just above the middle of the chart on the right side. It's in the sign of Capricorn. How do we know? And this is where it might be a little difficult to understand if this is the first time looking at a chart. There are these little blue lines on the inside of the dial, and those are where you can specifically know where the different planets are. We know that moon is at 0 degrees of Capricorn. It had just entered Capricorn when she was born. So she experienced her sense of self, the sun, through the sign of Virgo. She experienced the nurturing and the care and the self-care through the sign of Capricorn. And I mentioned this when we were going through the different signs. The moon is not happy generally in the sign of Capricorn because it's 180 degrees away from the sign that rules. Capricorn is about the world. It's about your place in the world and status and career. But the moon is, at its kind of basic core sense, is about care and nurturing and softness, and Capricorn can be a little bit of a hard sign. And then these lines that you see, the red ones would be your challenging aspects, and your blue lines will be your harmonious aspects. Again, there's no such thing as good or bad. It's all about consciousness. Maybe we could argue that Amy really struggled with the fact that that moon was so close to, was in Capricorn and actually so close to Neptune. Neptune is a planet that is associated with addictions. It's that need to connect to something else outside of this world. And the fastest way you can do that is, unfortunately, through alcohol and drugs. The other side of Neptune could be meditation. There's different ways to make that connection to the other side. And another major element in her chart, if you look on the left side of the chart, you'll see it abbreviated as A and C. That stands for ascendant. That's also known as the rising sign. And Amy had Gemini rising, the sign of Gemini rising when she was born, meaning that at the moment that she was born, the constellation of Gemini was rising in the east. And she was born at night. The sun is at the bottom of the chart. It's all, it's moving towards, so the top of the chart is above the horizon, would be daytime. The bottom of the chart is nighttime. So let me just see if there's any questions with this, because we're getting close to time. Yeah, again, we're going to be wrapping up in a few moments. So, so looking at Amy's chart again, the red line that goes across the circle, that would be your oppositions. The lines that look a bit, the red ones that are a bit shorter, those would be your squares. So she had her Virgo sun, and also she had Mercury in Virgo. And it was in the 5th house. Again, this is kind of going into the next class, but I wanted to give you a little taste of what the next class would be. That section of the circle, it's labeled with a 5. That's the 5th house. The 5th house is the house of the artist and the performer. And she had her sun in Virgo in the 5th house. So, she was known, well, she was a singer. She was very, and she had a beautiful voice, was, probably worked very hard to get where she was. And unfortunately, it ended a bit tragically. And that sun is making something called a square to Neptune. Probably a very artistic person, but again, it didn't quite end that well for her, unfortunately, it was just a huge, huge loss. And this time is accurate. Her birth time people were able to get her birth time from family members. I just want to quickly throw in another chart. Funny enough, these are both people born in 1983 with Gemini rising. One is Amy Winehouse and one is Edward Snowden of WikiLeaks fame. this is again somebody whose birth time we have. In fact, North Carolina is one of those states where you can, anybody can request a copy of somebody's birth certificate. And in this case, an astrologer did, and we have his birth information. So that's, again, the glyph for the sun is that circle within a circle, and it's in the very last degree of Gemini. It's on the left-hand side of the chart. So, you know, he's a Gemini. He's got a lot of oppositions, whereas Amy Winehouse had a lot of squares, and she had trines too. And you know, everybody hopefully has got some trines to, or sextiles to take the pressure off, because if it's just all hard energy, you can just feel like it's overwhelming. So that is that. Thank you very much for taking the time to learn astrology with me and listening to me speak for 2 hours straight. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Here are the links. My website is also empoweringastrology.com. I do hope you can join me there. I'm just going to take one last look and see if there's any final questions before we wrap up. I think that's it, guys. So thank you again for joining me. I am, recording this, and the idea is that because you guys have paid, thank you very much, you will get a copy of the video. I just need to sort that out, so give me a few days. I know it's also the holidays, but if you are really hot to trot to watch the video again, just send me an email and I'll figure out how to get it to you sooner rather than later. But if you are listening to this, not live, thank you again, and please send me your questions if you have any questions about the material, and I hope you can join me in a future class. So again, thank you. Turn on the video real quickly and just wave goodbye. There we go. So have a wonderful evening, and thank you again, and take care. Bye.